In the spring of 1924, a small Akita puppy arrived in Tokyo, Japan. He had soft fur, kind eyes, and a curious nature. He was just a few months old, but his destiny was far greater than anyone could imagine. His name was Hachiko. He was adopted by a man named Professor Hidesaburo Ueno, a respected scholar at the Imperial University of Tokyo. The professor was a quiet, thoughtful man who lived alone in a modest house in the Shibuya district. He loved plants, books, and peaceful mornings with a cup of tea. But something had always been missing in his life: a companion. When the professor first saw Hachiko, something clicked. He bent down, held the little pup in his arms, and whispered, "You're something special." From that moment on, they were no longer alone. A bond was formed, simple, silent, and strong. The early days were full of discovery. Hachiko learned where his food bowl was, where to sleep, and how to follow his new human around the house. He was smart, gentle, and attentive. He loved lying under the sun while the professor read in the garden. He would chase falling leaves, bark at butterflies, and nap at the professor's feet. As the days passed, their connection grew deeper. Hachiko followed the professor from room to room, always nearby. At night, he would curl up near the door, waiting for his human to rise the next day. If the professor ever left the house, Hachiko would wait patiently for his return, ears perked and tail still. Then, one morning, after a few weeks, the professor decided to take Hachiko with him to the train station. It was a cool morning. The cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom. They walked side by side to Shibuya Station, where the professor boarded his train to work. Hachiko sat beside him quietly, his eyes watching every movement. As the train pulled away, Hachiko let out a soft whine, as if saying, "Come back soon." And the professor always did. Every afternoon, at the same time, Hachiko returned to the station to greet his beloved friend. The sight was heartwarming. This small dog, sitting alert at the gate, tail wagging, the moment he saw the professor step off the train. It became a ritual, day in, day out. The people at the station began to notice. Shopkeepers gave Hachiko snacks, children patted his head, and passengers smiled at his loyalty. Hachiko became part of the rhythm of Shibuya. No one could have known then how extraordinary this quiet little dog would become, or how far his loyalty would reach. As spring turned into summer, the bond between Hachiko and Professor Ueno only grew stronger. Each morning, they walked together to Shibuya Station. The professor in his suit and hat, Hachiko trotting beside him with soft, confident steps. When they arrived, Hachiko would sit calmly by the gate as his master boarded the train. The professor would always glance back and give a small wave. Sometimes, he whispered something only Hachiko could hear, a promise, maybe, or simply a goodbye. After the train disappeared from sight, Hachiko would wait a few moments before turning around and walking back home. But every afternoon, before the train returned, he was there always, there waiting. He became a familiar sight at the station. At first, people found it curious. Then it became endearing. Soon, it was expected. Shopkeepers in the area started leaving little bowls of water and bits of food near the gate. Commuters would smile when they saw him, often pausing to give him a pat or a kind word. Children began calling him by name, Hachiko. Despite the growing attention, Hachiko never got distracted. His eyes were always on the tracks. His ears twitched at the sound of incoming trains. His tail wagged only when he saw his professor. This routine went on for months. Rain or shine, wind or snow, Hachiko showed up without fail. He had learned the train schedule by heart. He knew exactly when the 3 o'clock train would arrive, and he never missed it. Professor Ueno, too, cherished the ritual. He would often share stories of Hachiko with his colleagues at the university, his voice full of quiet pride. "My dog meets me every day. Like clockwork," he would say, smiling. At home, they were inseparable. Hachiko would sit by the professor's feet while he read, or curl beside his desk as he prepared his lectures. On weekends, they would walk together through the gardens, the professor sometimes talking softly, Hachiko listening without needing to understand a single word. Neighbors and station workers began to see more than just a routine. They saw love, loyalty, something pure. One train conductor even started making announcements that included a mention of Hachiko, jokingly calling him the station's honorary greeter. People laughed, but it was true. He had become a symbol of something rare in the world, unwavering devotion. And Hachiko, he wasn't trying to be a symbol. He wasn't waiting to be noticed. He was simply waiting for his friend. Because that's what love looks like when it comes from a dog. But life has a way of changing even the most beautiful routines. No one at Shibuya Station could have imagined that this daily goodbye would one day become a goodbye forever. It was a clear morning in May 1925. The city of Tokyo bustled with life, and the trains at Shibuya Station ran on time, as always. Hachiko walked beside Professor Ueno, his steps light, unaware that this would be their final walk together. The professor looked down and gave his friend a gentle pat on the head before boarding the train. As usual, Hachiko watched the train disappear down the tracks. Then, as always, he headed home, trusting he'd return in the afternoon to see that familiar face again. But that afternoon, the train arrived and the professor did not. While delivering a lecture at the university, Professor Ueno had collapsed suddenly, a cerebral hemorrhage. His colleagues rushed to help, but it was too late. He had died instantly, without warning. Word began to spread, slowly and painfully, but Hachiko didn't understand. He only knew that his friend had not returned. That day, Hachiko waited longer than usual. When the crowd thinned and the last passengers had gone home, he remained sitting, eyes fixed on the tracks. Finally, someone led him away. The next day, Hachiko returned to Shibuya Station at the exact time the professor's train used to arrive. He sat patiently, his eyes scanning every face that stepped off the train. But again, the professor wasn't there, and so it continued. Every single day, Hachiko returned to the station at 3 p.m., waiting faithfully. Passersby, who knew the professor, recognized the dog, and soon his presence at the station took on a deeper meaning. At first, station workers tried to shoo him away, thinking he was a stray. But people began to explain, "He's waiting for his master, the man who used to take the 3 o'clock train." Some tried to adopt him, offering him food and shelter. But Hachiko always returned to the same spot, always waiting. He had chosen his place, and he would not leave. The professor's relatives eventually took Hachiko in, but no home could keep him from his daily ritual. Rain poured, snow fell, seasons passed, but Hachiko remained, waiting. His story slowly spread beyond the train platform. A former student of Professor Ueno, who had become a journalist, wrote an article about the loyal dog. It touched thousands of readers across Japan. People were moved by the quiet dignity of a dog who refused to forget. Hachiko became more than a dog. He became a silent promiser, reminder that love does not end just because someone is gone. As the years passed, People began traveling to Shibuya Station just to see him. Children brought him treats, tourists took photos, artists sketched him, and always, at 3 p.m., Hachiko sat, ears perked, eyes full of hope. But hope is a heavy thing to carry, and as the years wore on, so did Hachiko's strength. Years passed, seasons changed, Tokyo grew louder, faster. But one figure remained constant, small, quiet, and faithful, waiting at Shibuya Station each afternoon, just as he had always done. Hachiko was no longer the young pup he once was. His fur had grayed, his body had weakened, and his legs were slower. Yet every day he walked the same path to the same place at the same time. And there he waited for a train that would never again bring the one he loved. He had become more than a dog to the people of Tokyo. He was a guardian of memory, a symbol of loyalty, so pure it brought strangers to tears. Crowds gathered just to catch a glimpse of him. Some would kneel and whisper words of encouragement. Others would bring food, flowers, even small wooden charms of good luck. Photographers came, journalists, schoolchildren wrote essays about him. In 1932, a national newspaper ran a story titled, "The Faithful Dog Awaits His Master Still." The story traveled across the country, and suddenly, everyone knew his name. Hachiko had become a national treasure. People were inspired. His loyalty became a lesson in classrooms, a topic in poems, a story shared between generations. In a time of rapid modernization, Hachiko reminded people of values that seemed eternal: devotion, love, and quiet strength. But Hachiko's body could not endure forever. On March 8, 1935, nearly 10 years after the death of Professor Ueno, Hachiko was found lying in the street near Shibuya Station. He had passed away peacefully, alone, but never unloved. The entire city mourned him. Newspapers printed his story on the front page. A funeral was held. People wept. Children brought origami flowers. Men removed their hats in respect. Hachiko's body was preserved and placed in the National Museum of Nature and Science in Tokyo, where it remains to this day. But his heart, his story, his spirit, those stayed right at Shibuya Station. Later that same year, a bronze statue of Hachiko was erected at the very spot where he had waited for so many years. The sculptor, who had met Hachiko in life, captured his gentle eyes and dignified posture perfectly. The statue became a gathering point, a place for quiet reflection. Even during World War II, when medals were melted down for the war effort and the statue was removed, the people did not forget. In 1948, it was rebuilt stronger, grander, and it stands there still today. Every year, on March 8th, people gather around the statue to honor him. Flowers are laid, speeches are made, and sometimes a dog sits quietly nearby, perhaps without understanding the story, but somehow feeling the weight of the place. Hachiko never spoke. He never asked for attention. He simply waited. But in doing so, he gave the world something rare and powerful, a reminder that love, true, unwavering love, can outlive even death.